Hey guys, welcome to Better Body Radio. This is another episode of the Better Body Radio show. Today we're talking about a nutrition topic, and today I'm going to be discussing with fellow Better Body coach Mark Doherty about setting up your initial diet for fat loss. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
All is well, all is well. So should we just dive right in at the deep end?
Yeah, we'll get stuck in, get right into it and give as much information as we can, see if people need this information and can apply it to their own goals.
100%. So Mark, what would you suggest to someone who's maybe, for example, they've not really had a focused goal in the gym for a while, they're maybe looking to transform their physique, they're trying to maybe focus and start off on a fat loss phase. How would you go about advising someone to maybe set up their initial diet to get their starting calorie and macro requirements?
Okay, so if it's solely from a body composition point of view, I want to find out first the history of that client. Have they been chronically dieting for a long time? Because obviously I'd want the first 2 or 3 weeks back on maintenance calories and then work from there, or potentially put them into a small deficit and work off the back of that. But anyway, if someone comes and say, for example, they have not been dieting and they're in good position metabolically, okay, maybe they have been inconsistently eating. And by that, I mean like they think they've been eating lower calories during the week and not eating this or that. And then at the weekends, they're eating everything. Then the first thing is to get the starting point and how do we do that? Now, there is a lot of calorie calculators out there. And people need to be aware that calorie calculators do not necessarily give you the exact starting point. There could be inaccuracies. Remember, there's 7 billion people in the world, and a calculator is not going to get it right for everybody. It's merely a starting point. So personally, I don't really use them. Through experience, I would have certain numbers in my head that I start clients off with. So from a fat loss point of view, I work off pounds. I know people work off kilograms. I'm going to talk in pounds. People can convert it. Usually from a fat loss point of view, we tell people to start on calories anywhere from 10 to 12 calories per pound of body weight. Now, initially, what I would like to do with a client, and if they're okay starting as high as possible, I may start on maintenance calories, which is usually between 14 and 16 per pound of body weight. I personally would start a client on 14. Now, there's a different thing we will cover another day about reverse dieting. We're talking about optimal starting points and starting high. Say we have a male. So I would like to start them on 14 calories per pound of body weight. Then I would like to work as protein out next. I usually go for most people 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Carbs and fats I will talk about in a second. So basically, if I have a 200-pound man on 14 calories per pound of body weight, he would have a starting point of 2,800 calories and 200 grams of protein. I am going to keep this man on that for 2 consistent weeks because number one, I want to get him back into consistent eating, get back into just timing his food where it suits him and see what works for him over the 2 weeks. And basically to see, I would want feedback basically on a daily basis on the first initial 2 weeks. If it's enough calories, do they think it's too much calories? And basically take it from there. Now, as carbs and fat are concerned, and yeah, I know like some coaches go higher calories on a training day, lower calories on a non-training day. I personally rather start on the same calories right through the whole 2 weeks. I don't like doing a training on a non-training day initially, but it's a good way of doing things. It's just another method. So it's completely, once you decide on what you're going to use, you go and use it and just stick it from there. So that is an excellent method as well. Anyway, so the calories, we're working them out. Remember, we don't lose fat in one day. We will lose it over the 7-day period. So we want to look at the overall calories over the 7-day period. And then the most important thing is tracking your progress. So we want to do measurements. We want to do scale weight, which will fluctuate potentially on a daily basis. So it's a good idea to do it on a daily basis so we can build up a pattern. As long as you don't become over obsessed with the scales, because that's the last thing we're worried about. And then photos, pictures are for me very, very important. because as you know, we could be working with a client for 4 weeks. They're looking at their body every day in the mirror and they don't see that much changes. And then as soon as you put the photos week 1 and week 4, they go, oh my God, I didn't realize I look like that in 4 weeks. So a very powerful psychological tool, photos. And then basically what I'm going to try and do is basically assess, right, have I got a maintenance point? And then I'm going to start on the deficit. The second option is I could potentially start right in on maybe working off that 10 to 12 calories per pound of body weight. And if I did want to do a training day and a non-training day, and someone wanted to push fat loss right off the bat, then I would give 12 calories per pound of body weight on a training day and potentially 10 calories per pound of, on a non-training day. Again, I keep the protein consistent and I start from there and I assess over the 2-week period. If someone loses like even half a pound to a pound a week, then I will not change absolutely anything. Then we need to make sure we've got a good starting point, as in we give them their weight training and a base level of cardio. We don't fire everything into the basket at the one time. We keep cardio as a tool. So we might just start on 3 by 20 minutes and over time we'll use cardio to create a bigger deficit. So carbs and fats. So basically I go for what a client prefers. We have to remember that you will get the same fat loss results if calories are the same and protein is consistent as going high carb, lower fat versus high fat, low carb. But you have to remember what we were training. Obviously, I prefer carbs as our energy fuel on a training day. Potentially on a non-training day, we can drop carbs and increase fats a little, which also allows for more food variety. But in saying that, you can literally keep the carbs and fat and the protein the same every day and take it from there. It won't make a difference. It's a 7-day deficit and you just take it from there. And that's basically how we would start. So we've got them figures. And at the end of the day, people have to remember, it does not matter if we get it wrong, because if I had a client and I started them on calories and they text me and they go, right, Mark, I'm starving after the meal at 12 p.m., then I'm going to actually increase food. I don't want anybody to be hungry in the initial 2 weeks of a fat loss diet, especially if it's somebody that's a little leaner, and especially if it's someone that's going to do a prep. The biggest mistake I see for contest prep is people are starting too low, too hungry 12 weeks out, because they're going to have a lot of suffering. So a lot as well depends on the client, where we're starting from, what we've done before, their past history of dieting. But for a ballpoint starting point, yeah, the 10 to 12 calories per pound of body weight is perfect. The protein consistent at a gram of protein per pound of body weight is good. Obviously, when we get deeper in the diet, we can increase protein, which is another factor as well. Or we can just start with increased protein from day one and keep it there for the whole period.
Brilliant. I think there's literally nothing for me to add there, Al. I think that's a fantastic summary. Just maybe an anecdote just to prove your point about how whether you do training or non-training or higher carb, lower fat, how it doesn't actually matter as long as calories and protein are equated. So I've got a long-term client. He's my longest term client, Paul. I posted about him not too long ago. We had really good results. The whole time I've worked with him, we've tried to implement high and low days. We've tried to implement outside of a linear intake. He just loves a linear intake, and every single diet we've done, he's been on a linear intake. Same on training days, same on non-training days. He's had fantastic results. He's just manipulated calories down. So that just has a clear example. However, on the other hand, I've had other clients where they have significant differences in how they feel between training and non-training days. Like you mentioned, I am one of those coaches that I have a bit of a bias towards training and non-training day intakes just because I've seen them work really well. However, I do agree 100% that you can't start with that from the beginning if people don't understand what the maintenance is. And it's easier to establish maintenance if you keep all the variables the same. So having that linear intake for even the initial 4 to 8 weeks of a diet can be super useful. And as people get more comprehension and understanding, you can then start to make tweaks from there. But like you said, Mark, if you had someone who's a bit more experienced and they can understand that whole game, they know what tracking is like, they understand maybe like training and non-training the intakes, then that's something that they've found has worked for them in the past. Then why not? You could definitely start there, but it's always going to be about working with that individual in front of you. But I thought your summary was absolutely bang on.
Yeah. Also as well, it's more like if I have a lifestyle client and they do want to push body fat to a lower level, but they still want to keep in like a little bit of a social life at the weekend, then we can talk about calorie cycling. As I said, um, losing fat is over a 7-day period. So what I mean by that is if a female was losing fat significantly on 1,500 calories, then I can multiply that by 7. That would be 10,500 calories over the 7-day period. And what I could do is go a little bit lower calories. Instead of going 1,500 during the week, I could go maybe 1,300 during the week and save some of her calories for the weekend. And she could be a lot more flexible and putting in. So she may have a day of 2,000 calories on her Friday, and she could put in like food she really enjoys and have a lot more flexibility. She wants a burger, fries, ice cream. Flexible dieting is a talk for another day. We'll not go there. We'll not confuse people as we're just talking about fat loss at the minute. Oh, there's my dogs barking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could talk about that the next day. And then people have to remember as well that everything should be done on phases. We can't be in a fat loss phase every week of the year. And this is the problem. What happens, people chronically diet. So we need to be careful of this because people chronically diet and then they get to the point where they binge, and then they get in this cycle, which is the diet binge mentality. And the reason for the first initial 2 weeks for me getting anybody back on track is just consistent eating and getting them away from binging. And when they realize, right, this is the high volume of food because it's nutrient-based food and it's like that lower calorie, but you can still include your fun foods in there, and you realize, oh, my energy levels feel great. I don't have a drop in blood sugar. I don't need to binge at night because I don't feel I have a massive craving. If they do, it might be psychological, and you could maybe use stuff like Greek yogurt. You could use berries, something sweet. So again, it's a very individualized process, and basically, like, good coaching comes from communication with the client and taking it from there.
Brilliant. I think that actually made me think about maybe a good thing to touch on is, people often ask what's a good way to start out setting up starting calories, but I think, like you just alluded to, often a good idea at starting with maintenance is that it's actually a lot less about the calories per se, at least from the point of view of just setting habits. Like you said, things like meal structure. What does composition of meals look like? And I've had this from I've had a couple of new clients start over the last 2 weeks, and the same feedback that I got was, this is a huge task. I'm not used to eating so much vegetables. And they started to realize actually that they just didn't have a lot of nutrient density in the diet. And so, yes, what I'm not saying is calories aren't important. What I'm saying is that by setting a maintenance set of calories and then putting more of a focus on, like, what are your habits and what are your meal structure looking like? Are you getting sufficient protein? Are you getting sufficient micronutrients? Are you getting enough veggies with most of your main meals? Are you unnecessarily excluding foods that you don't need to exclude right now, being overly rigid versus being a little bit more flexible in the beginning, and then understanding the continuum of nutrition and knowing that, okay, the deeper I get into the diet, I understand that it's going to be easier to stick to my plan if I omit certain foods for a short period of time. But that end goal is not to have all of these foods that I love out for a long period of time, because that's not sustainable, like you said. And then when people work back up towards maintenance after a diet, all those foods come back in, and then they're in a really happy place. And like you say, that avoids that whole bad relationship with food, giving unnecessary food rules and labels, and it gives them a nice healthy relationship with themselves and with food. So I think that's super, super important, is the initial setup of the diet isn't just a numbers game, it's also understanding the kind of habits that go alongside that as well.
Yeah, very, very important. And then there is, like, again, we need a starting point for everybody, but there is some exceptions to the rule who may need lower calories. Again, this could be a podcast for a different day. PCOS and hormonal issues. We'll talk about this another day. So, for example, a lady with PCOS may need 20 or 40% at a deficit to even get fat loss. So again, it all comes down to very much individualization and basically what's happening with the client. But at the end of the day, it's getting a starting point. It's finding, are they losing fat on that starting point? Are they being meticulous with the calories they're taking in? If they're not progressing in 2 weeks, then it's easy to tweak from there, meaning, do they need to decrease calories, or do we need to increase cardiovascular training? Yeah, I think that covers everything.
Yeah, I think so. And like you said, I think to summarize this podcast for today is that a starting point is exactly that. It's just a starting point. It's not an absolute, and it definitely can be tweaked or changed. And you know, good experienced coaches will rarely get it wrong, but it doesn't mean that sometimes we'll assign a calorie amount and actually things are not shifting much, and we may have to adjust that. And so it's just being important and patient and understanding that any calorie adjustment, whether you're someone who starting right in at fat loss, whether you're someone who actually needs to reverse diet because you've been chronically dieting for a long period of time, whether you've got metabolic disturbances or something like PCOS and you have to start lower, either way, it's always just a starting point, and it's being able to stay consistent and work within that framework so we can establish that starting point and then work from there. So I think that's key. And I think your summary, Mark, of all of the main points was fantastic. So definitely happy to wrap up there for today.
Yeah, and just on that note, we will cover in future podcasts diet breaks, reverse dieting. But as I say, this covers exactly about starting points.
Yep.
So we want to keep it brief and to the point, and hopefully anybody watching this can take it away and apply what they need to start their fat loss journey. If not, obviously you can contact the team at Better Body Collective and we can get someone to coach you.
Shameless plug. We appreciate that. Always happy for those. So guys, thank you very much for tuning in today. Remember, the best way you can support us is to go onto your preferred podcast station or YouTube, because you'll find this video on YouTube as well for those watching on there. Leave us a comment in the YouTube comment section or leave us a 5-star review in your chosen podcast platform. That is the best way you can support us and help us get our message and get this good quality information out to more people. Mark, thanks again for today.
Okay, thank you.